My name is Adriana Voss and I am 23 years old. 3 weeks ago I stood on a graduation stage in front of 2,500 people while my parents, the same people who told me I was not worth educating, sat in the fourth row with their faces completely drained of color. They had come to watch my older brother graduate. They had no idea I was even enrolled at that university. They certainly had no idea I would be the one delivering the keynote address. But this story does not begin at graduation. It begins 5 years earlier in my parents' kitchen when my mother looked at me across the breakfast table and said something I will spend the rest of my life remembering. Before I go any further, please take a moment to like and subscribe if this story is reaching something in you. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to that morning in 2020. The acceptance letters came on the same Wednesday in March. My brother Christopher had been accepted to Harland University, a prestigious private institution on the East Coast with a tuition of $62,000 per year. I had been accepted to Millfield State University, a solid public school 40 minutes from home. Tuition, $22,000 annually. Still significant, but a fraction of Christopher's school. That Saturday morning, Mom called us both to the kitchen table. She had a yellow notepad in front of her and a pen in her hand, the way she held things when she had already made a decision and was performing the process of making it. "Christopher," she began, "your father and we have decided to cover your full costs at Harland. Tuition, housing, everything." Christopher smiled the way he always smiled when he received what he expected. Then Mom turned to me. "Adriana, we won't be funding your education." I stared at her. I had known this was possible. I had suspected it for months. But hearing the words still felt like stepping off a curb I had not seen. "I don't understand." Mom set her pen down. "Christopher has a clear trajectory. Law school, then practice, carrying on your father's firm. That is a sound investment." She paused, and what came next arrived in the tone she reserved for explaining obvious things to people who should already understand them. "You're bright, Adriana, but you don't have a plan. You change your mind constantly. Funding your education right now would be throwing money into uncertainty." I looked at my father. He was reading something on his phone. "Dad." He looked up briefly. "Your mother has explained it. Figure out what you want first. Then we can talk." That was the entire conversation. No raised voices. No drama. Just a yellow notepad, a pen, and the quiet administrative erasure of my future. I went to my room and sat on the floor with my back against the bed and stared at the wall. I did not cry. The tears had stopped working years ago, used up on smaller things. The school play where they came for Christopher's performance and not mine. The science fair where I placed second and my father asked why I hadn't placed first, then turned away before I could answer. The birthday where they gave Christopher concert tickets and gave me a gift card to a bookstore I had mentioned once in passing, not because they remembered what I liked, but because a gift card required no thought. This was not a new story. This was just the final chapter of an old one. That night I opened my laptop and typed something into the search bar that I had never typed before. Scholarships for independent students with no family support. The results loaded slowly on our shared Wi-Fi connection, which cut out every time Christopher streamed videos in the next room. What I found that night would take 4 years to fully understand. I did the arithmetic on a piece of graph paper at 1 in the morning. Millfield State. $22,000 per year. 4 years, $88,000. Family contribution, 0. My savings from working weekends at a garden center since I was 15, $1,900. The gap was not just staggering. It was the kind of number that is supposed to mean stop. If I could not close it, I had 3 options. I could defer and work for a year, maybe 2, and arrive at college older and further behind. I could take on debt that would take decades to clear. Or I could simply not go, and become exactly what my mother had described. The daughter without a plan. The one who changed her mind constantly. The bad investment. I was not going to do any of those things. I scrolled through scholarship databases until my eyes ached. Most required essays, references, evidence of need. Some had deadlines already passed. Some were clearly not real. Then I found two things that changed the direction of everything. The first was Millfield State's own foundation scholarship for first-generation and financially independent students. Full tuition coverage plus a housing allowance. 12 recipients per year from a pool of several hundred applicants. The second was something called the Hartley Fellowship, a national award for undergraduate students demonstrating exceptional academic achievement and personal resilience. Full tuition, $9,500 annually for living expenses, awarded to 25 students across the country. And at partner universities, the Hartley Fellow from each graduating class delivered the commencement address. 25 students in the entire country. I laughed once, quietly, alone in my room. Then I bookmarked the page and kept reading. I had two choices. Accept the life my parents had already decided I would have. Or decide for myself what my life would be. I chose myself. But I needed a plan immediately. I filled an entire composition notebook that summer. Every page was a calculation. Every margin held a contingency. Job 1. Early morning shift at a campus dining hall. 5 to 8:30. Estimated monthly income, $750. Job 2. Weekend custodial work for the university's athletic facilities. $380 per month. Job 3. Tutor for the campus writing center, if I could land it. $12 an hour, up to 15 hours per week. Total estimated monthly income. $1,400, roughly $16,800 per year. Still more than $5,000 short of tuition alone, before housing or food. That gap would have to come from merit scholarships. The kind built entirely from what I produced. I found the cheapest housing situation within walking distance of campus. A room in a 4-person house rented by a graduate student who needed help covering her lease. $285 per month, utilities split 4 ways. 1 shared bathroom, a kitchen with no dishwasher, a bedroom barely large enough for a twin bed and a desk. It would be enough. It had to be. My schedule before I had even arrived on campus looked like this. 5 a.m., dining hall. 8:30, walk to class. Classes until 4. 4 to 7, tutoring or study. 7 to 10, assignments. 10:30, sleep. 4.5 hours a night, 5 at most, for 4 years. The week before I left, Christopher posted photographs from a lake vacation with his college friends. New boat, rented house, golden afternoon light. I was repacking my second-hand suitcase for the 3rd time trying to make everything fit. But every night that week, before I closed my eyes, I said the same thing quietly to myself in the dark. This is what it costs to belong to yourself. I did not fully understand what I meant yet. I would, eventually. And I did not know yet that somewhere on the Millfield campus there was a professor who would see something in me that my own family had spent my entire life looking past. Sophomore year. Fall semester. Introduction to Political Theory. Professor Alan Marsh was the kind of instructor who made students afraid to be unprepared and grateful to be called on. 22 years at Millfield. Author of 3 books. The kind of professor whose recommendation letter could open doors or quietly close them. I sat in the second row and took the most careful notes I had ever taken. The first paper came back with a grade I had to read twice. A plus. At the bottom in his precise handwriting. Come see me during office hours. I spent 2 days assuming I had done something wrong. His office was small and completely covered in books, the kind of office that looks chaotic and is actually organized in a system only one person understands. Professor Marsh was at his desk when I knocked. He waved me in without looking up. Adriana Voss. Yes, sir. Sit down. Saturday. He looked at me over his glasses. This paper should not have been written by a second-year undergraduate. Where did you go to school before this? Public high school. Nothing specialized. And your family? Academic background? My family does not support my education. I said it the way I had learned to say it, factually, without the edges that used to come with it. Professor Marsh set down his pen. Tell me what that means exactly. So I told him. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. The kitchen conversation. The yellow notepad. The 3 jobs. The 4.5 hours of sleep. The scholarship databases at 1 in the morning. When I finished, he looked at me for a moment without speaking. Have you heard of the Hartley Fellowship? I sat up straighter. I've seen it. 25 recipients nationwide. Full funding. And at partner institutions, the fellow gives the commencement address. He folded his hands. Adriana, I have been teaching for over 2 decades. I nominate 1 student for the Hartley every 3 years. I have never nominated anyone in their 2nd year. He paused. I would like to nominate you. The next 2 years became something I can only describe as the most difficult and most clarifying period of my life. Up at 4:45 every morning. Dining hall by 5. Classes by 8:30. Study until midnight. Sleep. Repeat. I missed everything that college is supposed to also be. Late-night conversations in common rooms. Intramural sports. Campus events. The slow accumulation of shared experiences that, not happiness exactly, not contentment, but the specific quiet of a person who is not performing anything for anyone, who is simply where they are, doing what they have decided to do. My friend Simone, who I had met in the tutoring center and who had become the closest thing I had to a person who knew all of it, had left me a small package before she went home. Inside was a jar of good coffee and a handwritten card. For the girl who has earned every single thing she has. I put it on my desk and looked at it for a while. The email arrived at 7:12 on a Monday morning in October of my senior year. Subject line, Hartley Fellowship Foundation. Finalist notification. I was in the dining hall. I read it 3 times standing next to the industrial coffee urn with steam rising around me. Dear Miss Voss, out of 312 applicants, you have been selected as one of 60 finalists for the Hartley Fellowship. The final round will take place at our offices in Washington, D.C. 60 finalists. 25 awards. Better odds than I had allowed myself to calculate. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday. Washington, D.C. was 9 hours away by bus. I checked my account. $612. A last-minute flight was not possible. A bus ticket was $61 round trip. I had enough for that and for 2 nights in the cheapest room I could find, a shared hostel dormitory at $38 per night. I told Simone. She looked at me for a long moment. How are you getting there? Bus. Leaves Wednesday night. Gets in Thursday morning. She went to her bag and came back with 2 things. A $20 bill and a blazer she had bought secondhand at a consignment shop that still had the original store tag inside. Navy blue. Good condition. She held it out. This fits you better than it fits me anyway. I tried to hand it back. Adriana. Her voice was the voice she used when she had already made a decision. Take the blazer. Go to Washington. Win the fellowship. So I went. 9 hours on a bus, arriving in D.C. at 5 in the morning with a stiff neck and the borrowed blazer in a garment bag across my lap. The waiting room at the Hartley Foundation offices was full of people who looked exactly like what I was not. Confident, composed, wearing clothes that fit the way clothes fit when they were bought new for the purpose. Parents or partners in the chairs along the walls. I sat alone and held my folder of documents in my lap and thought about Professor Marsh's words. You don't need to look like you belong. You need to show them you do. 2 weeks after the interview, walking across campus between my morning shift and my first class, my phone buzzed. Hartley Fellowship Foundation. Decision. I stopped on the sidewalk. A student on a bicycle had to swerve around me. I did not notice. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Voss, it is our honor to inform you that you have been selected as a Hartley Fellow for the class of 2025. I read it 4 times. Then I walked to the nearest bench and sat down and put my face in my hands and cried the way I had not cried since I was 17 years old, when I finally understood that what my family had been giving me was not a complicated version of love but simply less. 4 years of 4:30 mornings and instant oatmeal and borrowed textbooks and the specific loneliness of building something entirely alone poured out of me on that bench while students walked past in both directions. I was a Hartley Fellow. Full tuition. $9,500 per year for living expenses, and the right to transfer to any partner institution in the Hartley network for my final year. That night Professor Marsh called me. I just received the notification. His voice was different from his classroom voice. Warmer. I want you to know I am genuinely proud. Thank you, I said. For everything. There is one more thing to consider, he said. The Hartley allows transfer to a partner school for your final year. Harland University is a Hartley partner. Harland. Christopher's school. If you transfer, he continued carefully, you would graduate with Hartley honors. And the fellow delivers the commencement address at graduation. I sat very still. Adriana. If you transfer, you would be giving the keynote at the ceremony where your brother is graduating. I am not doing this for revenge, I said quietly. I know. I am doing it because Harland has the strongest program for what I want to do next. I know that too. A pause. But if your family happens to be in the audience, he said, that is simply a fact you cannot be responsible for. I made my decision that night. I told no one in my family. 6 weeks into my final semester at Harland, it happened. I was in the East Reading Room on the 3rd floor of the main library, working through a dense set of primary sources for my thesis, when I heard footsteps stop near my table. I looked up. Christopher stood 4 feet away, a coffee cup in one hand and an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something between confusion and the specific disorientation of seeing something you cannot immediately categorize. Adri. His voice was careful, like he was testing whether what he was seeing was real. What are you doing here? When did you? How? I closed my notebook. Hi Christopher. You go here. Since when? Mom and Dad didn't say anything. Mom and Dad don't know. He blinked. What do you mean they don't know? Exactly that. But how are you affording Harland? They're not paying for you. I mean they told me. I transferred on a scholarship. The word sat between us. Christopher's face moved through several things in quick succession. Confusion. Then a slow recalibration. Then something that looked, underneath the surface, like shame. Which was interesting, because I had never seen that particular expression on my brother's face before. Why didn't you tell anyone? I looked at him. My older brother. The one the yellow notepad had been written for. The one who had received everything I had been told there was not enough of. Did you ever ask how I was doing? Did you ever call and ask whether I was managing? He opened his mouth. Closed it. I need to get back to this. I turned back to my sources. Christopher. His voice stopped me. Do you hate us? I considered the question. I have asked it of myself many times over the past 4 years. I looked at him. No. I don't have enough left over for hate. I just stopped waiting. I left him standing there and went back to my reading. That evening my phone showed 4 missed calls. Mom twice. Dad once. Christopher once. I silenced the phone and went to bed at 10 o'clock for the first time in as long as I could remember. Christopher told them that same night. I know because he called me 3 days later and described it. He had barely come through the door of his apartment, he said, before he was calling them. She's here, he told them. Adriana is at Harland. She's been here since September. According to Christopher, my father's first response was not that is wonderful or how did she manage. It was that cannot be right. She does not have that kind of money. She said scholarship. My father's voice had gone quiet in the way that meant he was thinking rather than reacting. What scholarship? She didn't say. My father called me the next morning. It was the first time he had dialed my number since I left for Millfield 4 years earlier. Adriana. Dad. Your brother says you are at Harland. Yes. You transferred without telling us. I didn't think to. A pause. Of course you should have told us. We are your parents. Are you? The words came out level, without heat. You told me I wasn't worth the investment. You told me to figure out what I wanted first. I figured it out. Silence. We should discuss this in person. Sure, I said. You'll be at graduation for Christopher. I'll see you there. I hung up. He did not call back. That evening I sat in my single room at Harland, the one I was paying for myself, and thought about the conversation. He had not said he was wrong. He had not said he was sorry. He had said we should discuss this, which was the language of a person who wanted to manage something rather than understand it. In 5 months they would be sitting in an audience watching. And for the first time in my life, they would not be able to look past me. The weeks before graduation moved slowly at first and then very fast. I knew my parents and Christopher were coming. They had booked a hotel and made a dinner reservation at a restaurant in the city and ordered a flower arrangement for Christopher's celebration. None of that information had been shared with me. I knew it because Simone had driven up and was staying in my room, and she had helped me research the logistics of the ceremony until we both knew the layout of the venue better than we knew our own apartments. Professor Marsh called 2 weeks before the ceremony. "Would you like me to notify your family that you are speaking?" "No. I want them to hear it when everyone else does." He was quiet for a moment. "This is not about causing them pain." "No," I said. "It is about saying true things in a room I was never supposed to be in." Simone took me shopping 4 days before graduation. Not thrift stores. An actual store, on an actual budget I had set aside from the past 3 months of careful spending. I found a dark burgundy dress. Midi length. Clean lines. Nothing that announced itself. Simone looked at me for a long moment when I put it on. "You look like someone who has already won," she said. "I feel like I might actually be sick." Exactly the same energy. The night before graduation I could not sleep. Not from anxiety exactly. From something harder to name. I kept trying to rehearse what I would feel when I saw them. Whether the old weight would come back. Whether standing in the same room as my father would undo something I had spent 4 years carefully constructing. At 2 in the morning I stopped trying to predict it and just lay in the dark and breathed. I was not the same person who had sat at that kitchen table with the yellow notepad across from me. Whatever I felt tomorrow, I would feel it as someone else. Someone I had built. Graduation morning. June 3rd, clear sky, warm sun, the particular quality of light that makes every photograph from that day look like it was planned. Harland's main quadrangle held 2,500 people. By 8:30 it was nearly full. Families with flowers and cameras. The particular energy of an event that everyone present has been building toward for years. I arrived through the faculty entrance and found my seat in the honors section at the front of the stage. My regalia was the standard black gown, but across my shoulders lay the silver sash of the Hartley Fellow. A small bronze medallion was pinned at my chest. 20 feet away in the general graduate section, Christopher was taking photographs with friends. He had not seen me yet. In the 4th row of the audience, slightly left of center, sat my parents. My father in a dark gray suit. My mother in a pale blue dress, a large arrangement of white flowers in her lap. Between them sat Christopher's girlfriend, who I had met once at a family event 3 years ago and who had looked at me the way people look at things they have been told not to worry about. My father was reviewing something on his phone. My mother was waving at someone across the aisle. They looked exactly like what they were. A family that had come to celebrate the person they had invested in. They had absolutely no idea. The university president approached the podium. "Welcome to Harland University's commencement ceremony for the graduating class of 2025. Applause. I sat with my hands in my lap and my breathing steady and looked at the backs of their heads. In a few minutes everything would change. The ceremony moved through its stages. Opening remarks. Recognition of faculty. Honorary degrees for 2 individuals whose names I knew from their work. The usual architecture of a formal occasion that is also, beneath its formality, extremely human. Then the university president returned to the microphone. "It is my honor to introduce this year's Hartley Fellow and our commencement speaker. A student whose record at this university and whose journey to this stage represents something we believe is central to what education is actually for." My mother leaned toward my father and said something. He nodded without looking up from his phone, which he was pointing at the stage, oriented toward the area where Christopher was sitting. "Please welcome Adriana Voss." A moment of complete stillness. Then I stood. 2,500 people turned toward the honors section. I walked to the podium, my heels precise on the stage floor, the Hartley medallion catching the light. In the fourth row I watched my parents' faces change. My father's phone dropped slightly. Not all the way. Just slightly, like his hand had received a message his mind had not yet processed. My mother's flowers shifted in her lap. Confusion. Then recognition. Then something that had no clean name, a combination of disbelief and the specific expression of a person who is revising a large assumption very quickly. Christopher's head turned toward the stage. I saw him find me. I saw him understand. I reached the podium. I adjusted the microphone. 2,500 people were applauding. My parents were not. They sat in the fourth row like two people who had arrived at a destination they had not purchased tickets for. For the first time in my life, they were looking at me. Not at Christopher. Not through me. At me. With their full and undivided attention, which was the only thing I had ever actually wanted from them, and which I had learned, over 4 years, to live without needing. I let the applause settle. Then I leaned into the microphone and said the thing I had written and rewritten 12 times over the past month. Good morning. 5 years ago I sat at a kitchen table and was told that funding my education would be throwing money into uncertainty. In the fourth row my mother's hand moved to her mouth. My father's phone was now fully lowered. I was told I did not have a plan. That I changed my mind too often. That I was not a sound investment. I paused. So I made a different investment. In myself. I spoke about the 5 a.m. shifts in the dining hall and the custodial work on weekend mornings and the tutoring sessions and the 4.5 hours of sleep. I spoke about what it feels like to build something with no foundation except your own decision to keep building. I spoke about the scholarship databases at 1 in the morning and the bus to Washington, D.C. and the borrowed blazer. I did not name my family. I did not point to the fourth row. I did not need to. The people in that row knew exactly which kitchen table I was describing. The greatest thing that was ever taken from me, I said, was also the greatest gift I was ever given. Because what was taken was the option of being handed something. And what that left me was the only path I had. Which was to earn everything. Every single thing. In the fourth row my mother was crying. Not the comfortable tears of a proud parent. Something older than that. Something that looked, from the stage, like grief arriving 20 years too late. My father sat completely still and looked at the podium with the expression of a man who has just understood something he cannot undo. To anyone who has ever been told you are not worth the investment, I said, and let the words land before I continued. The person who said that was He looked away and then back. You're right. I know you're right. Mom arrived beside him. Her mascara had not survived the ceremony. Adriana, sweetheart. I had no idea. I didn't know you were doing all of this. You didn't ask. The words were not delivered with anger. I had processed the anger a long time ago. What remained was simply the fact of it, stated plainly. We thought you were figuring things out, my father said. I was figuring things out. I looked at him steadily. I figured out that I was worth every investment I made in myself, even if you didn't think so. That's what I was figuring out. He flinched. It was the specific flinch of a person who has heard the accurate version of something they had been carrying as a different version. We made a mistake, he said. I made a mistake. You said what you believed. I kept my voice even. And maybe you were right, from your perspective. I wasn't a clear investment case. I didn't have a linear path. I had no plan you could point to. I paused. But I did have one thing. I was willing to pay whatever it cost to prove myself right about myself. And it turned out that was enough. The Hartley Foundation chairman appeared at my elbow and extended his hand. Miss Voss. Exceptional address. The foundation is very glad to have you representing us. I thanked him and shook his hand while my parents watched. My mother reached for me when he stepped away. Her hands were shaking slightly. Please. Can we go somewhere and talk? Just the three of us? I looked at her. At my father. Not today, I said. Today I want to be here. In this. Without managing anyone else's experience of it. My father's jaw moved. He looked older than he had at Christmas 3 years ago, the last time I had been home. Something in his face had the quality of a structure that has been load-bearing for a long time and has just had the load increased significantly. "We love you." His voice was rough. "We have always loved you." "Maybe," I said. "But love is also what you choose to do. And you made choices. They made me who I am. I'm not sure I'd trade them. But I'm also not going to pretend they didn't happen. I'm sorry." The words came out of him with a difficulty that was its own kind of testimony. "Francis, I am truly sorry." He had used the wrong name. He had called me by the wrong name. I looked at him and understood that he was so far outside his own composure that his own daughter's name had slipped. "Adriana," I said quietly. "My name is Adriana." He closed his eyes. "Yes. Adriana. I'm sorry. I'll call you," I said finally. "If you want to talk, actually talk, I'll call you when I'm ready." "Not today. But I will." Christopher found me an hour later near the catering tables. He stood beside me without speaking for a moment, which was more self-awareness than he had ever demonstrated in my presence. "I had no idea," he said finally. "I know. I mean, I knew things weren't fair. I knew you got less. But I didn't ask about the rest of it. I didn't think to ask." I looked at my brother. The one the yellow notepad had been made for. "I'm not sure it would have changed anything if you had." "Maybe not." He was quiet. "But I should have asked anyway." "Yeah. You should have." He looked at me with something I recognized as the beginning of a different kind of looking. "Not the way you look at someone you have always seen. The way you look at someone you are seeing for the first time." "Can we start over?" he asked. "We're 23. I said. "We don't get to start over. But we can figure out what comes next." I walked back into the reception and spent the rest of the afternoon shaking hands and answering questions and letting the afternoon be what it was. Late that evening, alone in my room with Simone sitting on the floor eating the pastries we had saved from the reception, I felt something arrive that I had not felt in 4 years. Rest. Not sleep. I would sleep soon. But the specific sensation of having finished something large and found it finished correctly. Simone looked at me. "How do you feel?" "Like I can breathe all the way down," I said. She nodded like that was a complete answer. Which it was. The fallout began before my parents had even left the city. By the time they reached their hotel that evening, the Hartley Foundation had posted a clip from the ceremony on their social media pages. The clip was 47 seconds. It began with my first line about the kitchen table and ended with the applause. By morning it had been viewed 11,000 times. 41 guests who had attended the ceremony, friends of the family, professional contacts, parents of Christopher's classmates, had either texted my parents or posted their own responses. I am told this by Christopher, who called me 2 days later with a full account. Mr. Reinhold from Dad's firm apparently told Dad he had watched the clip 6 times. Said your speech was the best thing he had seen at a graduation in 20 years. Dad apparently did not know what to say. Mrs. Caulfield from the neighborhood, you remember her? She called Mom. Said she had no idea you were at Harland. Said she had always known you were remarkable. Mom apparently hung up the call and went into the kitchen and cried for 40 minutes. Dad stepped back from a committee at their church the following week. Unofficial explanation was personal reasons. People who knew the family understood it differently. Within the first month I had received 6 new professional contacts through the Hartley network, 2 interview requests from firms I had applied to speculatively, and a mentorship offer from a woman who had been a Hartley Fellow herself 15 years ago and who had watched my speech from her office in Chicago on her phone. Simone called me on a Tuesday to tell me she had counted the number of individual messages I had received from strangers. 94, she said. I told her I had not read most of them yet. Frankie, she used the nickname she had given me in our second year, which I had never corrected because it belonged to a version of me that existed only in those 4 years and that I was not ready to leave entirely behind. You changed things for people who watched that speech. I thought about a girl at a kitchen table with a notepad across from her and a father who was looking at his phone. Someone should have changed things for me, I said. Maybe that's why. 2 months after graduation I was in my own apartment. A one-bedroom in the city where my new job was located. Entry-level policy research position at a non-profit organization whose work I had followed since my junior year. The salary was not large, but it was mine, which made it the largest amount of money I had ever had. The apartment was small. One window facing a courtyard. A kitchen where the oven and the counter were the same surface if you pushed things to the side. But I had chosen it. I had signed the lease myself. I had put a small plant on the windowsill and a print I had bought at a street fair on the wall above the desk. Professor Marsh called on a Saturday afternoon. "How is the city?" "Loud," I said. "Expensive. Full of people who walk very fast." He laughed. "That sounds right. I'm proud of you, Adriana. I want you to know that. Thank you. For the nomination. For all of it. You did the work," he said. I only pointed at it. Simone visited the following weekend. She walked through my apartment, looked at the plant, looked at the print, looked at me, and declared it the most Adriana apartment in the world, which I took as a compliment. 3 months after graduation, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten on my mother's stationery, which I recognized by the small embossed M in the corner that she had had for as long as I could remember. Adriana. I don't expect this letter to fix anything. I don't expect it to be enough. I'm not sure anything is enough for what we did and didn't do. She wrote about the ceremony. About watching me walk to the podium and not recognizing me immediately and then recognizing me and the specific sensation of that moment, which she described as the floor moving. She wrote about the clip she had watched too many times to count. She wrote about a conversation she'd had with my aunt, her sister, who had apparently looked at her and said, "Virginia, you raised 2 children and only bothered to no one." "I know I can't take back 5 years," she wrote. "I know I can't give back the Thanksgivings and the phone calls I didn't make and the question I never asked. I know there is a version of you that I missed entirely and that I can't find now because you built it without me and it doesn't need me to find it. I'm writing because I need you to know that I see it. The version of you that exists. I see it now. I'm sorry I needed a stage and 2,500 people to make me look." I read the letter twice. Folded it precisely. Put it in the small box where I keep documents that matter. I did not reply yet. I was not ready to find the words. But I knew I would, eventually. On my own timeline. Because that was mine to decide. The following month my father called. It was a Sunday evening. I was reading. I looked at his name on the screen for a moment before I answered. "Adriana." "Hi, Dad. Thank you for answering." His voice had aged since graduation. Something in it that had not been there before, a quality of weight that belonged to a person who is carrying a new understanding about something they cannot put down. "I heard you." He exhaled. "I should have called sooner. I know that." "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't know what to say." He paused. "I still don't. But I kept thinking that if I waited until I had the right words I'd never call at all. So just say what's true," I told him. A long pause. "I was wrong." He said it plainly. Not about one thing. About all of it. The kitchen table. The money. The years in between. The way I looked at you and saw a question mark where I should have seen a daughter. I was wrong and I am sorry and I understand if sorry is not enough. I sat with that for a moment. "It's a start," I said finally. "It's all I have. Then let's start there." We talked for 20 minutes. About nothing significant. About my new job and the apartment and the plant on the windowsill and whether the oven worked. Small things. The kinds of things that are the only available building material when you are starting from almost nothing. It was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness, not yet, not fully. But it was 2 people trying to speak to each other honestly across a distance that one of them had created and the other had survived. Which was more than we had managed at any point in the 23 years before it. It has been 18 months since graduation. I have been promoted once at the non-profit. I am applying for graduate programs in public policy, with strong support from my organization and from Professor Marsh, who writes the kind of recommendation letters that take up a full page and leave no important thing unsaid. Christopher and I have dinner when our schedules allow, which is not often but is more than never. He is finishing his first year of law school. He is working harder than he has ever worked. I think the last year has recalibrated something in him. I am not certain. But I can see him trying to see things differently, which is what trying looks like at the beginning. My parents visited last spring. 2 days. They stayed at a hotel 2 blocks from my apartment, which was the right distance. We had dinner the first night, the 4 of us, at a restaurant I chose because I knew the menu and felt comfortable there, which was the only criteria that mattered. My father looked at my apartment, at the plant and the print and the small organized life I had built, and said, "You made this. All of it?" "Yes," I said. He nodded, slowly. I believe that now. It was not a large statement. But it was an honest one. And honest statements, in my experience, are worth considerably more than large ones. I donated $8,000 to the Millfield State Scholarship Fund 6 months ago. Anonymous. For students without family financial support. Simone found out and called me immediately. Adriana. She used my full name, which meant she was serious. "You are actually the best person." "Someone helped me," I said. "Before I helped myself, someone helped me." Professor Marsh. Simone. The scholarship programs that existed when I found them. None of what I did was done entirely alone. I just had to decide to start. I thought about the girl at the dining hall at 5 in the morning in her uniform, eating her employee meal, who put her phone face down rather than look at ski trip photographs. I thought about the bus to Washington, D.C. and the borrowed blazer and the waiting room full of people who looked like they belonged and the decision I made to sit down anyway. I thought about the kitchen table and the yellow notepad and my mother's pen. I thought about 2,500 people getting to their feet. If you are still here, let me say the one thing this whole story has been building toward. You do not need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself. That is the whole instruction. Your family's belief in you is not the raw material from which your life is made. Your own willingness to keep going is. And those are not the same resource, and only one of them is actually yours. I spent the first 18 years of my life waiting to be selected. I spent the next 4 learning that the only selection that mattered was the one I made for myself, alone in a room at 1 in the morning with a composition notebook and a cracked laptop and nothing but the decision to begin. I am 23 years old. I have a plant on my windowsill and a job I chose and a scholarship fund with my invisible fingerprints on it and a father who called me on a Sunday and said I was wrong out loud for the first time in his life. It is not a tidy ending. Real things rarely are. But it is mine. Every piece of it. And that, it turns out, is the only thing that was ever going to be enough. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story reached something in you, if it gave you language for something you have been carrying, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment. Subscribe. Because there are more stories coming and every one of them belongs to someone who spent too long waiting to be seen.